Welcome to the Business Women Australia podcast show, the podcast that brings together industry leaders to discuss the latest trends, insights and strategies. So sit back and relax. Let's get inspired by the amazing women who are shaping the future of professional women in Australia. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Welcome to the Business Women Australia podcast show. I'm really excited. I'm Lyn Hawkins. I'm the National Director of Business Women Australia, and we're streaming live across Meta and YouTube. I've just noticed LinkedIn's dropped out, so we will catch up on LinkedIn. We will be recording, and you'll be able to catch us on Spotify and iTunes. I'd like to pay respects to the Noongar elders on which the land of which I'm streaming from. Pay respects to elders past, present, and those emerging. And today I'm delighted to have the fabulous Tanya Mills on the show. We're going to dive into the idea of mental wealth leadership and look at how that applies from high performers to have sustainable success. So if you're a business owner or a leader or an executive, we'd like to ask you, when was the last time you put yourself first? Look, I'm very inspired by Tanya Mills. She's an executive coach, a business advisor, an entrepreneur who successfully built an IT company and expanded to New York. And she exited through a successful sale, and she reveals how top leaders can avoid burnout and create sustainable success as a part of her professional and personal story. There's loads of lessons that we're going to be diving into today, and we're going to hear some practical ways to reclaim your energy, sharpen decision making, and lead with clarity. So if you're here listening, well done you. This is a good opportunity to stop and learn about this concept of mental wealth. Tanya, tell me, you've scaled, and you've even sold businesses. What did leading teams of 200 people plus teach you about sustainable success?
Well, I'd firstly like to say I absolutely love leading teams and I love leading organizations. But during that period, it was about a decade, I wasn't self-aware, and I also have a type A personality. So it's kind of all or nothing with me. And it was, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. And so for me, that meant working around the clock, nonstop, maxing out and keeping going no matter what. So I really experienced chronic burnout for a very long time, but I wasn't aware that I was experiencing it. I wasn't happy, and I knew something was going on. So maybe I might share a little bit of my story, if that's okay, Lyn, because it will provide a bit of context for the other questions. So I, about 15 years ago, I started up my own company with my husband at the time, and it was in IT. IT was not something that I have been trained in or was passionate about. I was a little bit lost in terms of where I wanted to go in my career, and my husband started up the company. And so he asked me to come on board with him and lead the company operations. And so I jumped at the opportunity because I was, like I said, I was lost and I didn't know what else to do, but I knew I wanted to lead. So we did that together, and the team and the business in Perth grew quite quickly. And I really absorbed myself into business, and it just became everything I did, breathed, thought about. I really became consumed in accelerating our business and creating growth at any cost. And as I went on, I started losing parts of myself, and bits of the important balance just started to become out of whack. But I just kept going. Sorry, that was my phone. I kept going. And then the business was doing so well, we decided to expand it to New York City. It was my husband's idea because it was his dream. He loved New York. And once again, I went along with the idea because I thought it would be a great adventure. And I also saw it as an opportunity to escape, because I was quite miserable at that point. Even though the business was so successful, I was miserable. I didn't have any balance in my life. So when we went to New York, we didn't have a plan. And as you can imagine, everything that I was experiencing became 100-fold, because we had to start up a business from scratch in New York City. And so we did that. And initially I loved it because it was an adventure and exciting. But very quickly, all the problems that I had before around feeling lost and not looking after myself, they came back, and they came back very, very fast. And so before I knew it, was a couple of years in, things started to go downhill pretty quickly. And at that point, I had just had a baby. I had broken up with my husband. We had become separated. He had mental health issues. And I was running 2 companies by myself with my daughter, and just incredibly lost of where I was at in life, and so stressed all the time. I would literally wake up with a knot in my throat, because IT is a very stress-related, reactive industry. And also, like I said, not something that I know by nature well. And so I got to a point where I just became completely broken and burnt out, and a mother, and single, and on the opposite side of the world to my family. And my family didn't know what was going on, because I kept the mask on, and I pretended I was fine. I was too scared to tell them, because I thought I would be seen as a failure. And that's nothing to do with them. It's just how I had projected. I wanted to be a success all the time. I created an identity for myself around being successful. And eventually it took me down. It took me down really hard. And then when COVID hit, I flew back to Australia with my daughter, and I had time to stop. And I just looked in the mirror, and I saw a pretty ugly sight. It was a lost woman in her late 30s with a daughter who had been following someone else's dream for 12, 15 years and had no idea what she wanted to do or who she was. And so sustainable success for me now is really such an important topic. And it just taught me the whole experience taught me that balance is important, and coming from a place where you're aligned with who you are first is the most critical thing of being in business.
I mean, that's quite profound, really, and the story is unfortunately quite a common story, Tanya. You know, we see this a lot with very successful entrepreneurs who do build and scale their businesses and are employing loads of people, and there's something not right. You know, they still feel empty, or in your case, they're burnt out entirely. And we often focus around sustainable success being around the business as opposed to being around the leader. So you've introduced this topic of mental wealth to me a while ago. And look, maybe you could explain what that means to our listeners.
Yeah, sure. So when I raise the term mental wealth, I'm usually responded with kind of like a blank stare from people. And we all hear the terms mental health often, which is more around coming from a place where we're coping and we're feeling off, and we're trying to get back to a baseline. It's more around surviving. So mental wealth is completely different to that. And so the best way I describe it is mental is the mind. And one definition for wealth is around producing more of something that is good. So the best way I can describe it is our mind's ability to produce a more amount of something that's good. And that's something as leaders that we want to be doing, not just in the workplace, but also in our personal lives as well. We want to be able to lead with intention and clarity. And we want to have great energy and be vibrant when we're leading. And then we want to go home and do that in our lives and be there for our families and have great health. So mental wealth is really about showing up as the best version of ourselves in work and also in our personal lives. And in order to do that, we need to look after our mind. And there's a whole bunch of different practices that are involved in that, but a lot of it is around having clarity and learning to stop, which is the thing that I have found the hardest in my journey, because my brain is wired to just go all the time. I even still fight with it today. Every day I have like a different voice in my head, and then I shut it down pretty quickly because I can acknowledge it. But a big part of this mental wealth is about doing things for us that give us the energy to look after our mind, so we can do more good in the world, and overall really do more good in the world.
So when you think about the lessons that it might highlight for a CEO who feels like their calendar's already maxed out, what bubbles up for you around that and the idea of mental wealth? Yeah.
So the maxed out calendar, that was me. But I actually had, because when we moved to New York, we didn't have enough money to have a service manager. So I was the service manager as well as the CEO, and was also looking after the business operations. So I was looking after a service board of tickets coming in from all the different companies in New York. That was my maxed out calendar. So every second it's like this. So if you have a maxed out calendar, you're maxed out essentially. So you don't have any opportunity to think, to be present, to be mindful of what's going on for you, to listen to any signs that are going on in your body. And also with your team, you don't have an opportunity to be present with them, have conversations. That sometimes the water conversation is the best thing you can do. It doesn't necessarily have to be in a monthly meeting. And so the maxed out calendar is really a sign to say, stop, and let's take a minute to reevaluate what's important and integrate into the day moments of pause, perhaps going for a walk at lunch. I used to eat my lunch at my desk in front of everyone. I was the most awful role model. As a leader, I'd get there first and leave last, and I wouldn't leave the desk. And so I think as leaders, it's important to create space, not just for ourselves, for our team as well, and just create space to do nothing, which is another hard thing to do. But it's amazing when you sit there and do nothing, you're actually doing your best work. The ideas flow, and you're still working, but it's not the type of work that we're trained to do.
Yeah, we were just chatting about that, weren't we? The sort of flow that you get when you ruminate and you just sit and be and be open. So when we're thinking about sort of leaders in these roles where they might be running on empty, what are the first things that start to slip, and what's that real cost to organisations?
So when you say running on empty, what does that look like? So running on empty is lack of energy, mentally. So your mental wealth is down. Physically, the vibrancy isn't there. And then from foggy mind comes from running on empty. So there's a lack of clarity with making decisions. We also tend to let bad habits creep in when we're running on empty. I know when I have a bad night's sleep, I'll eat something bad first thing in the morning. I'll just, like, everything, my good habits just tend to just disappear. And relationships and things tend to have more of a negative vibe to them, don't they? Or attract more drama. The world has a completely different lens when we're running on empty. And that's part of life, to run on empty sometimes. I mean, I ran on empty for 10 years. That is completely unhealthy. But if we have a big project or something going on in our lives, it's okay to run on empty for a bit, but bringing back the balance is really important. So when you're running on empty for a long period of time, the impact can be, it will flow in a negative way from the top of the organization, because you no longer have the energy to look at strategy and also look at it in a way where what's happening in the world and where do I need to pivot or look at different risks and involve people in those conversations. It becomes kind of, you don't really want to be, that's critical thinking. And when we're using that part of the brain, the conscious part of the brain, that's hard work, and it takes up a lot of our energy. It's 10% of our brain, but it really does consume a lot of our energy. And so you become cognitively depleted, which is that the brain fog. I'm sure everyone's been there, when you can actually feel that strain in your brain. And when that happens for a long period of time, you're not aligned with really what's going on, both for you and for the organization as well. And so that can impact everything on every level over time. And it might not seem, if you just take one day, for example, you might have one bad conversation with a person, you'll skip your workout, you'll go home and eat crappy food and then have a late night watching TV for escapism. If that's one day, that's fine. But if you're doing that repetitively every day, it will, and it might not seem like a lot, but it will definitely compound over time. And so relationships will be degraded, more toxicity will happen in your life, more drama. And then from an organizational perspective, you start losing sight of what's going on, and a zest really for wanting to grow and adapt and do all the things that empower and inspire others and the organization. And so things start to decline, and it's a sharp slope. Once you get there to that point where it's up here, then it starts going down pretty quick. So the impact is massive.
And it certainly impacts the people around you, the people you're leading. Now, when we look back and see how you built that IT business, it started in Perth, you expanded to New York, you sold that business to an American company, you did all this while you were pregnant, giving birth, and then dealing with a marriage breakup. This experience is quite extraordinary. And how has it impacted on you personally? But also, how has it shaped your leadership philosophy? I think we've had a little bit of a taste of that, but how's that sort of really impacted your way of thinking about leadership?
Yeah. Okay. So when I was at my worst, which is the lowest point of my life, when I was pregnant, I was, like I said, I was alone, and it's just the worst feeling in the world when you're by yourself and you're alone and you've hit rock bottom and you have a baby inside of you and you have no idea what you're doing with your life and you haven't looked after yourself and there's no plan. So, and you're running 2 companies. So it's an awful confrontation that I had to have an awful confrontation with myself, and a realization that this is not good enough. This is my life, and I now have a child to bring into this world, and a sense of responsibility and a legacy is more than about me now. And so I had to rebuild myself and learn from the start what my purpose is. And a purpose is everything, because I was following someone else's purpose. And I thought it was fine because I didn't have my own. And it's really finding something that lights you up, I think, is really important. And that's number one. And then really understanding what my values were, because our own values they're like our compass. They drive every decision we make every day. It's amazing when you really understand how they impact the tiny little moments of your day. You just revert back to your top 2-3 values, and usually they're the ones where you spend most of your time and money. So my ex-husband's was success, number 1, and number 2 was freedom. So it was about creating success in our business and making lots of money, and then secondly, it's wanting to be away and doing different things and also having a lot of fun, but there was no grounding or alignment there. And once I'd learned about this, I realized that my number 1 value is love, and love for myself, but also love for my family and friends. And the second one is health and vitality, and really learning I've always been passionate. I've got a degree in sports science. So I love going to the gym and looking after myself and eating well. And I lost that for so long, but it, like you said, is so important, health. And so those values are so different to what my husband's were. And so I started living from a place of my values, making decisions around that. And what that meant was saying no to other things and creating boundaries, because we can't do everything. So I mainly live my life from my top 3 values. My third one is around fulfillment, which involves my business and coaching people. And my fourth one is peace. So, having that inner peace. And they're very different to what my ex-husbands were. So I think as a leader, knowing what lights you up, and then coming from a place for your inner leadership that is values driven, and then that will then extend to your leadership in the organization, because you're leading from an authentic place. And when you do that, you're consistent. You're consistent with your decision making. You're consistent with how you show up. And when you are consistent, people can feel it, number 1. But when things happen, lots of change and challenges in the world, like all the stuff that's going on at the moment, you can still show up consistently for your people, and they'll trust you, which is essential. It's the most important thing. And so that's, really coming from this alignment of your inner leadership first is such a huge thing that I've learned. And then, the world will come at you, and you can adapt and evolve, but you're still making decisions based on you and how you would operate first.
Yeah, there's a lot of wisdom in that, Tanya, and clearly you're resilient. You're a very resilient person. In fact, a lot of top highly successful executives pride themselves on resilience. How do you know when that resilience is sort of tipped into depletion?
Yeah, okay. So resilience is an interesting word, isn't it? I've spoken at seminars and conferences, and I feel like it's thrown around quite a bit. And when I looked into it, there's a few different definitions. So the first one is what I call kind of the old school way, which is what I was involved with, which is really when you have a big challenge or a big setback, you kind of wade through the murky waters, you get out of it, and then you just keep going. No matter what, you just keep going. And it's really kind of more take the punches, survival mode, but then I've got to get to the end, I've got to win, which was how I lived a big part of my life. And then there's another view on resilience, which is what I believe is more the leadership view, which is around, obviously it still involves difficult times of challenges. However, those challenges are used as an opportunity for growth, and you learn to adapt from the experience. From a leadership perspective, you lead your team through that challenge in a calm way, in a grounded way, and then you come out of it and you do lessons learned and you pivot where needed. So it's an opportunity for growth. You still keep going down that path, but it's you instead of bouncing back, you're bouncing forward is probably the best way I'll put it. And then I've got a different variation that I've added into the mix, which is my own one, which is called the Balanced Success View, which is a bit different because it's more around an energy system, resilience being an energy system. So it's all the little things that we're doing each day that we're thinking about our energy. So all the positive habits that we have, all the little things where eating the right food, taking our pauses, doing your meditation or being grounded, having positive relationships and saying no to more things that aren't in alignment with who we are. And when we do that consistently, I believe that creates a resilient system so that when things come at us, like the challenges and so on, we're better equipped to deal with it. It actually doesn't seem as hard, and we tend to flow through it more. I've been practicing that lately, and I've really noticed a big change with how I dealt with the old school resilient way. And then I adopt a combination of this way and then the leadership way, because I don't think there's one way. We can flow between them. This is life, and nothing's ever perfect. Sorry, what was the second part of that question?
More around how do you know when it's tipped into depletion? But I do love those definitions. One of them that first one reminds me that a lot of our leadership training came from military command control and resilience. Your definition of resilience at the beginning there was very much around the battlefield and winning, as you said. It came from battlefield thinking. And I love the way that you've evolved this leadership resilience to be more holistic. That's extraordinary. So, when we think about resilience dipping to depletion, I guess that really does depend then on where you're drawing your idea of resilience from based on your definitions. Yes.
And then I think when you're tapping into depletion, it's simple, but it's kind of honing into how you feel. Because we all know how we feel if we actually give it attention. I didn't give it any attention for 10 years, but now I do. And if something feels off, so one of my telltale signs actually was when I'm off, I'll lose keys. I'll lose my car keys, and then once I left my my laptop on the roof of my car. I was putting my daughter in the car for daycare on the way to work. The daycare was around the corner. So I drove to daycare and I looked in the passenger seat where the laptop was meant to be and it wasn't there. And I couldn't believe it. So I dropped her off and I thought, oh, what's happened? And I drove up and down the street, couldn't find it. So it obviously flung off the roof of the car into someone's garden. But that's a sign, right? And I know when I lose my keys or do dumb stuff like that, hello, something's going on, but I still chose to ignore it. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm in that place. Maybe I'll just go to bed early tonight or something. But that is a sign that I need to actually stop and realize that that's not normal. And I knew it wasn't normal. So it's really like listening and tapping into what's going on and not brushing it off as just, oh, that happened. Just keep going.
Yeah, incredible to develop that kind of awareness of yourself. And you tell us about the structure and flow model. You've mentioned it to me before, and I think our listeners would be very interested to hear how they as leaders can apply it to balance some sort of control with adaptability in their worlds.
Yeah. So structure is important for organizations, and I think we all know that having a plan with goals and having an alignment of strategies that head up towards that, your KPIs, your meetings that align, all of that is important. But when it's all there is, which is, I used to do coaching, I used to coach businesses on creating business plans, and it was creating that process. But it didn't have anything in there around, okay, well, where's the space for looking at, brainstorming, what ifs, where's the space for like thinking about innovation or just sitting with the team because we can, and just having conversations that are creative or constructive, who knows, like just kind of let it be. And I previously working in IT industry, it's heavily regulated and, SLAs and all sorts of things. And it just becomes stifling and feels very controlling. And I feel like it's really the outside world just coming in, and then we've just forgotten about this. And why it's an important conversation at the moment is with AI. I mean, if it depends on the leader and how they think about it, but it has the potential to stifle the flow even more because we're automating more so we can do more, and we also outsourcing a lot of our thinking because I type it in and it comes up with a plan, and it's like, I don't need to think anymore. And, if we're not careful, bit by bit, our brain matter will start kind of dying off because we're not thinking critically, we're not embracing our creativity, and we're not diving into our intuition, which is what we all have and is very important, I believe, as a leader, to not just outsourcing to AI. We need to really dive into, okay, well, how do I feel? What am I sensing? And how, what's the energy like? AI can't read the energy in your organization. And so it doesn't factor that in. And so having the time for flow, I just think it's more important than it ever has been. And so you can't just have the flow and you can't just have the structure. So it's like finding a way to integrate both of them. So I think having your meetings and your KPIs and you're looking at your P&Ls, I get that. Been a business coach for a while and it's so important. But what I've realized now is integrating those periods of flow for yourself and then also the team are just invaluable. And who knows what will come from that. When I was writing my book, I went through writer's block quite a bit. And so when the best thing that I did was stop, and then I would either do nothing or I'll jump on my Peloton bike and I'd just start riding my bike at home. And all these ideas would just come through. It'd be like I had to have a pen and pencil next to the bike in the end because there was sweat all over it. It wasn't very pretty, but all my best ideas came when I was in flow.
And it's a great concept, flow. It's not a concept. I mean, I was studying it 25 years ago when I was really diving into a lot of this sort of mindset work, and Csikszentmihalyi's work on flow around mastery and control and the sense of time passing because you're, in an absolute state of losing yourself in something that and so you get a lot of deep joy and purpose from. So when we go back to this first step as a leader, turning potential burnout, if there is someone listening to this show right now and they know in their heart of hearts that they can feel that everything's maxed out, they're possibly even doing things like leaving their laptop. I've got a girlfriend who left her laptop on the train, leaving their car keys on the, in strange places, doing all these things where they might miss a meeting, whatever it is that happens to you when you know that you're starting to get to that point of burnout. How do they take that first step to be moving it more into a sustainable performance that's sustainable for them as an individual?
Mm-hmm. So the first step is recognizing that it's happening, because that's I think the hardest part, because we can be very dismissive. If I lost my keys, I'm just a bit stressed today. If I've missed many friends' birthdays, they called me up, where are you? I'm like, just like completely lost track of the time. And it's there are ongoing signs if with your health as well. If you're getting headaches, that's a sign. If there's so many different signs that are speaking to us all the time. And really that self-awareness is important. So listening to what's going on, try to do it from a different perspective, from an outside perspective, perhaps. If you could see yourself from someone else and these things were happening, how would you see it? And so once you acknowledge that, okay, this is more than a bad day, this is more than one headache, because I'm stressed, then it's an opportunity to stop, and it doesn't have to mean a day, but it's taking time to really think about what's going on, because you need to figure out what you're going to do about it, and that means changing stuff that's happening in your mind, and your habits, your thought processes, and your default way of being and operating. And that's not easy to do, because our brains are wired. We operate from the subconscious place 50% of the time. So to override that, you have to be really conscious about it and be consistent. So that's why I say stop, and then figure out what you're going to do to start turning that beast. That was what I called myself, the beast, before. It took me about 4 years to really, of consistent approach and effort, to rewire my brain to not keep going to that burnout place. It was wired to burn out. So when you said one step, I would say self-awareness and acknowledging that it's happening would be my first step.
Well, your story is remarkable and highly inspiring. And, if we look at leaders actually investing in self-care, what are the ripples that'll happen through an organisation's culture, and what kind of results, could occur as a result of them actually spending some time focusing on self-care?
Yeah. Right. So, self-care it sounds simple, but there's a lot involved, because there's so many layers to that. But if a leader is really embracing, coming from a place where they're aligned with who they are inside, and then what they do in the world is aligned with that as well, then it's everything to being a leader of an organization, isn't it? Because people, it has first and foremost an energy to it. So people will feel and see a leader who is prioritizing their health and prioritizing mental wealth, relationships and so on, just through their actions. Taking a lunch break, not doing what I did and sitting at your desk and gobbling up your food and, mess everywhere. All the little things have a big impact, because people will role model what they see. They'll feel it first, they'll see it, and then they'll start, oh, it's okay for me to leave and go for lunch. And, then if you perhaps if you go for a jog at lunch, oh, it's okay for me to go for a walk. And if I have to leave early one day, that's fine. And, all those little things, they come from the top, and it creates a positive culture. And it has a really positive energy that flows through every aspect of the organization. And it creates positive relationships from that, which are absolutely critical. And it also invites people to have more mental space to be able to do their best work, because they have that clarity, they have more energy to be able to show up and be aligned with what they're doing and speak up if they want to speak up, and feel involved and part of the purpose of an organization. And when people are empowered in that way, where they can be aligned with themselves and the organization, that's when you're going to get the best out of people, isn't it? And everything will kind of synergize in a better way than if a leader isn't looking after themselves. And if they're seeing them, working around the clock and frantic and scattered, and then kind of emotional roller coaster and not looking after themselves physically, it has a very different vibe to it. And at the moment, there's a lot of anxiety in the world and things happening with so many changes. And what we need is leaders that are inspiring and empowering, and being a part of having a sense of belonging to an organization that is positive. And, you know, we want to be a part of that. Otherwise, people just they'll just drop off, won't they? You just see if people aren't happy and it trickles from the top, just, you know, all of a sudden someone's gone and this has changed and no one's been told about it. And so, yeah, I think it's absolutely critical.
I agree. I really agree. And I think in this time when productivity rates can be so high now with the help of technology and AI, there's never a more important time to be sitting back and slowing down our space so that we can think and be creative and bring joy and relationships back into the workplace, because that's where the greatest collaborations and co-design can happen. And, you know, this is a real opportunity for the world. I'm sort of, you know, I'm of the age when, you know, I grew up without the internet, and, you know, I studied technology and the impact of technology and what was coming when I was at university, and then worked at, with computer companies very early in the piece. And I'm seeing that this next transformation in business and in organisations is going to be similar to that onset of the internet coming. And I just think it's a great opportunity for us as humans to actually ask that question at work, you know, what is it that brings me joy in the workplace? What is our purpose, you know, as a shared community, and how can we do things differently? And I think that this is a really great reminder. Your story is a real inspiration. And I think, you know, hindsight's a great thing. If you look back at your own success journey and you think, what could I do differently, knowing what I know now and the wisdom that I hold, what would that be, Tanya?
Well, I wouldn't actually do anything differently for me in this point, because it wouldn't have led me to where I am now. And I needed to have a really big breakdown to have a breakthrough. So I've been through a lot of grief through the trauma, but I have learned to be grateful for the experience. And now I'm doing my best work working with others. But in terms of advice for other people, if that was kind of off the table, I really think it's about doing something that you're passionate about, that lights you up. And it's because if you're not, I mean, I think we all have our own uniqueness and things that we love. And it might not necessarily be in your work, but if you're happy in your work, but it's not something that lights you up completely, but you still feel fulfilled, then in your personal life, you know, hobbies and things like that. So I think that's really, really important. And then I touched on it before, but coming from a place of where you're living and breathing your own personal values and understanding what they are. And it's an interesting exercise to go through, finding out what your values are, and then the hierarchy of them is very important in your decision making. And sometimes a value might not serve you. So I thought success at all costs was, you know, my value, and I had to really align with what my number one actually is. And then I had to learn how to live my life by making decisions and prioritizing that. And so if you don't know what your values are, or if you do and you're not happy with one, because it's all about where you're headed as well, you know, your values will determine where you go in your life and how it ends. So if one isn't serving you now, think about 20 years from now, and remember, things compound. So take that into consideration. And, you know, it's essential. The values, I feel like, again, it's an overused word. I've been to that many values workshops and things like that, but they're more from a business perspective, not our own. So we need to come from a place of what ours are first. So that would be what I would do differently.
Yeah, that's very insightful, and to understand what the values are of those around you and your team, and be curious about that too. It's, really quite exciting. So, you've moved out of tech and IT, and now you've established Lyn Success, and such a wonderful business that you have, and your coaching and helping business owners and organisations. Tell me, who is your ideal client, and what are the ways that you work with your clients?
Oops. So executives and business owners that are more established. So people that have gotten to a point where they have achieved a certain amount of success in their businesses or their career. They are very growth orientated, driven, and kind of push. They've been kind of in that, the busy mode, perhaps not come up for time to have a breath, and have made some sacrifices as well. So really people that have achieved a certain level of success, but they might be getting to that point now where their energy is getting depleted, there's so much going on, and they're thinking, at what cost? I might not be going home to my family at a time that is reasonable. My health isn't, I'm experiencing some health problems. And so when I work with executives, it's about helping them to working with them to still perform and be a great leader, but then looking at things like, what's their identity as a leader, what their values are, and what their habits are, those types of things. And then for a business owner, it's still working to create strategies and working on a model that creates success for their business. But then how do we do that in an aligned way so that your business is here to serve your life, not the other way around? And that's a big thing with business owners. It tends to just take over, and then you get to a point and you're like, oh, what about me? What about me? I've heard that so many times. What about me? And so my approach is to still create the success. I'm not anti-success, I'm not anti-performance, and I'm not anti-growth, but it's what about me as well. And doing that with the aligned approach, the balanced success model that I've created, I integrate that into my coaching. So we kind of look at all the other non-negotiables as well as creating business success. So those are the two types of clients.
And you've written a book, you've got a bunch of keynote presentations, super excited to be having you in the Business Women Australia program. So tell us about your newly launched book and about the various keynotes that you think that industry seminars and team building days and various conferences should be considering to bring you in to chat about.
Yeah, so I've just written a book. I've got my launch this week. It's called Balanced Success, and essentially it's everything that I've been talking about today. It's understanding that we don't have to compromise if we're driven people and we want to do a lot in the world from a work perspective and business perspective. But, I've created a model that covers what I believe are the non-negotiables, which is how I live my life now. And so in terms of keynotes, I definitely think this topic, mental wealth, is important, because we talk about health, we talk about mental health, physical health. Rarely we talk about the mind, and how important is it we operate from this? It serves us very well. We need to look after our minds, and I just don't think it gets enough attention. And then how to also, thriving in a world that is so fast-paced, which is really around the balanced success model that I've created, I think is important. Things like the structure and flow model are also important, and also the revised idea of resilience, because I think that's just a very interesting conversation, the resilience. So, yeah, and then health and vitality. I haven't really touched on that much today, but health is really my number one pillar. If we're not healthy, how can we be there for our people, for ourselves, for our family. And it's just too often it just gets pushed aside, doesn't it? You know, you buy the unhealthy lunch because it's convenient, and not go to bed at a good time, and all of those things. And it's like we have to look after ourselves. So I could talk to you all day about health and vitality. So I think that's just an absolutely critical topic. There's so much misinformation out there around foods and even the toxins everywhere. There's just so much in that topic alone. So you can tell I'm passionate about it.
And again, another important area of self-leadership in terms of modelling behaviour and creating cultures where everyone looks after their health. If you do, others will follow suit. Look, how can our listeners find you, Tanya, and buy your book? Where can we buy your book?
If you go to my website, which is alignsuccess.com.au, there'll be a little thing on there that leads you to Amazon. Or you can come to my book launch. Everyone's welcome. It's this Thursday. The details are on the Business Women Australia website. Or you can contact me.
Yeah, find Tanya Mills. She's got a website. She's on our directory of Business Women Australia directory. She's on LinkedIn. She's prolific and well worth following, well worth connecting to and learning from. Tanya, your wisdom's extraordinary. I did want to find from you the top 5 tips of executives. You've covered them already, but I'm going to ask you to write that into an insight article into one of our Business Women Australia blogs. We can share that across our e-news. If you're not already subscribed to Business Women Australia, jump onto our website and get our monthly e-news. You can check out our insight articles, recordings from podcasts, from our webinars. And if you've been thinking about getting involved and joining Business Women Australia, we'd love to have you. And then you can rub shoulders with extraordinary leaders like Tanya Mills. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Tanya.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
It's been wonderful. And good luck with the book launch. I'll be buying that book and enjoying that read. I'm off to long service leave. Traveling around India and then off to Vietnam. I'll be wanting to pack a few great books to read, so I'll be looking forward to that.
Thank you.
We'll have you back on the show next year again, see how things are going then. See you, Tanya, and thank you, everyone.
You have been listening to the Business Women Australia podcast show. We hope you've enjoyed today's episode and gained some valuable insights to empower you on your journey. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe to stay updated in our latest episodes. And if you're not already a member of Business Women Australia, what are you waiting for? Head to our website today and join so that you can connect with a thriving community of inspiring women across Australia. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.